Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Jedi in Exile. I am Brian and I'm joined here, of course, with my good friend Matthew. And today we are talking about the 2016 canon novel Dark Disciple by Christie Golden. And it seems quite apt that we're talking about this because we have just seen Asaj Ventress in the Bad Batch Season 3 trailer. So we felt like we needed to go back and reread this book because apparently the storyline won't be retconned by the Bad Batch.
And obviously, if you guys have read this, you know why that was such a massive thing when she appeared in the trailer. There was fans outcrying everywhere. So spoiler alert, she dies.
Yeah, it just led to a lot of questions, didn't it? And I think it led to that many questions that almost 24 hours after the trailer for Bad Batch dropped, Disney actually did release a statement to say this will not retcon the book Dark Disciple.
Yeah.
So again, it'll be interesting to see how that does play out in Bad Batch. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about the book. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Because I have to say, so this was based, let's start with the backstory. This was actually based on a Clone Wars arc that never actually got produced for the show. Which I can kind of understand. I mean, books always delve in a bit more, don't they? But this would have been, in my eyes, to make it a good arc, I think it would have had to have been quite a long arc. You're talking sort of 4 or 5 episodes to get the juicy, decent stuff.
I think it's not even just that. I think it deals with some quite, like, okay, I'm gonna make the comment that everybody makes, which is that Clone Wars was a kids show. We've talked about this before, and obviously it's not, right, and people look at it and go animation kids show, blah, blah, blah. But
There's some quite adult themes, isn't
there?
And
a lot of the Clone Wars, you could get away with, like, the storylines. There were some adult themes, but it was introduced in such a small way that kids could enjoy it by watching it for what it was, and then adults could also then kind of relate to the higher levels and the more grown up themes.
You didn't really have to have watched it before, whereas now with the whole Filoni-verse, except you kind of need to have watched Clone Wars now, don't you? So I think they realised that later on, and that's why, you know, people always say the first 2 seasons are the childlike, and then it gets a bit darker and it gets a bit more adult-ish.
I feel like this was probably too far for the TV.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. And so obviously the story is we've got Quinlan Voss, who is introduced in season 3. I want to say episode 9 of the Clone Wars, where he has an episode with Kenobi, where they trace down Zero the Hutt, who has escaped from prison by the help of Cad Bane. So we have a brief introduction to Quinlan in that episode. He kind of teases Kenobi. It's clear that he's not your conventional Jedi, and that is definitely expanded upon in the books, and that storyline of his is kind of solidified. That, you know, he's an undercover Jedi. He doesn't do things the way that normal Jedi would. Seems to operate mostly on his own. Seems to be a bit of a loner. He is in the Phantom Menace. I'm going to throw that out there. We kind of discussed this briefly off camera beforehand. He is in the Phantom Menace, but his character wasn't actually established.
No,
then.
so they took.
So he's in Mos Espa, isn't he? He's sitting. I don't know if he sat
like
with.
No, it's like outside a cantina.
Well, it's when they first walk into Mos Espa, and Jar Jar does the long tongue to nick
stealing the food.
Yeah.
Stealing the food.
Hey, you want a Wonka? What?
But no, I think I like when they do stuff like that because I feel like it makes the universe feel bigger and more thought out. Now, obviously, that was done retrospectively.
Well, it's the whole Rex Return of the Jedi thing, isn't it? It's that kind of it's taking something that's already been done and thinking, right, we can create this. We can create a story for this character.
Flesh everything out a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, what we see in the Clone Wars episode, in terms of Quinlan and Obi-Wan's relationship, that's very much expanded on, because Obi-Wan seems to be almost Quinlan's liaison between Quinlan and the Jedi Council.
So I think the book kind of gave the impression that of the members of the Jedi Council, he is the one that he is closest to, and that Kenobi kind of understands a little bit more the sorts of things that he has to go through and deal with these assignments.
I think when you have Anakin as an apprentice, you realise that there are other ways of doing things rather than the conventional Jedi way, because I think Obi-Wan in 9 out of 10 circumstances is a conventional Jedi.
Yeah, agreed.
He was very different to Qui-Gon. He said to Qui-Gon in Phantom Menace, if you did things more Jedi-like, you'd be on the Council. But clearly Anakin has had some effect on him with that, because Anakin is very much not a conventional Jedi. So I think Obi-Wan, kind of sympathizes with Quinlan a little bit. And it creates... There seems to be two schools of thought on the Council, doesn't there? They seem very split on Quinlan throughout the book and this assignment, and it being so far away from the Jedi moral code that they're actually sanctioning an assassination.
Yeah, and I think that was... So obviously that's how this kind of all kicks off, right?
Which doesn't seem that out of the question. In normal military, if you can take a
high-value
take
target
out the leader of your opposition, that's saving billions
put a
of
stop
lives
to the war, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I totally get it. It's interesting because the dynamic of the Council comes out a lot more in this book, based on the fact that you've got Mace Windu very much staunch. It's got to be the Jedi way. We have to do things by the book. It has to be this, that, and the other. Obi-Wan, who, like you said, 9 times out of 10 would be the traditional staunch Jedi, but actually in this book comes across much more empathetic, much more kind of
I think understanding of Quinlan's situation, understanding that, especially with the whole love with Asaj, and I think Obi-Wan doesn't want to ask a question that he doesn't want the answer to, so he doesn't want to say outright, are you with Asaj or do you love her? But he knows that it's happened, and so he kind of... He doesn't want to say that to the Council, does he? They have discussions about whether they let Quinlan back into the Council, whether they give him another assignment. And he's very much the one. He knows that Quinlan has been through a massive struggle in the sense that he's had to choose between, well, the Jedi and Asaj, the Jedi way, etc. His whole life he's known, and Asaj, and he's chosen the Jedi, but realizes what Quinlan has actually had to give up by doing that.
And I think part of that maybe comes from the situation that he went through with Satine.
Yeah.
Because I think we tend to forget that is the side of Obi-Wan that isn't discussed very much, which is he almost... I think he pretty much has said that she's the woman that he would have left the Order for if she hadn't been murdered. And so I think that in itself kind of gives him this extra dimension, and you see that play through. I also love that with all the Jedi Council interactions, you've got Mace on one side, Obi-Wan on the other, and then Yoda just playing it down the middle.
Yoda is very much a fence player. He doesn't say we should do the assassination, but he doesn't say against it, so everyone just takes it as though
he's not said no, so we're okay.
Yeah,
we're
he's not said no. But there does seem to be an interesting dynamic played out. There's a couple of scenes in the book where obviously you've had the Jedi Council meeting, but then you have the kind of High Council meeting, which is Yoda, Mace, and Obi-Wan. So Obi-Wan, even though he's only been on the Council a short while, is seen to be a senior member of the 12. And you've got, Ki-Adi-Mundi is in, I think, a scene with them as well, and obviously he's an important member. So it's interesting that Obi-Wan just climbs the ranks so much, but has such a strong voice and is actually willing to question Mace and willing to say, this isn't right, or this is a dark path we're going down, etc., etc. So I think it's interesting the dynamic between members of the Council. And clearly, the Jedi, this is a wider story, but the Jedi are in a bit of a moment. Which way do they go? They're now generals in a war, whereas they were peacekeepers before. So they're changing. Some of them are going with it, some of them aren't. It's a really interesting dynamic that obviously the Jedi Council encapsulates that for the whole of the Jedi, and how Anakin just tags along to everything that he can with Obi-Wan. He just can't let him go.
I do love that. I do love that, and I'm sure obviously the book in some ways is written from Quinlan's point of view. I know there are some scenes from Obi-Wan's point of view, but mostly from Quinlan's point of view and Ventress's point of view. And so some of the narration, one of the things I really liked about the book is some of the narration is clearly kind of half internal monologue. And so I'm sure there's a comment about surprise, surprise, Skywalker's tried to tag along. I thought that was great. I loved the development of the friendship between Obi-Wan and Quinlan and fleshing that out more. All the stuff where he's like sat in the bar and he still keeps turning up even though Quinlan's not.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
he's
in the sense of
clearly
hope,
like
isn't it?
worried about him.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
definitely, because I think he gets a feeling where he, obviously he warns Quinlan that Asajj is a playful character. She's a lot smarter than I think a lot of the Jedi Council, but a lot of the Jedi give her credit for. Um, and she's a lot more powerful as well. The fact that she killed Quinlan's master, but played it off that it was Dooku and almost let the charade sort of slip. So yeah, I thought that was the whole dynamic and the storyline, how it played out. And this is where I think a book can do it so much better, because you can read the monologue inside, thoughts that are going on that you can't really get across in television. The whole battle that Asajj goes through with kind of falling for Quinlan, and the battle obviously that Quinlan goes through falling for Asajj, and it's almost like the Across the Stars theme, and the lovers like Anakin and Padme, that they shouldn't be right for each other, but they just are. So yeah, I thought that dynamic between them, we get so much of that, and obviously it's a sad ending. It's a sad story in the end. Quinlan, as he turns to the dark side, comes back to the light, and Asajj is the one that sort of brings him back to the light. And who'd have
sacrificed
and
herself.
who'd have thought that? And then she sacrifices herself, and Quinlan eventually survives Order 66. I mean, he would obviously be thinking of her, and he lives a fairly long life after the purge, and so he's probably going to be thinking about her constantly. And it just blows my mind that this Star Wars can come up with this. It's not just action; it's a love story as well. And Quinlan's such a complex character, and we know that Asajj is anyway through the Clone Wars, and obviously later on she's in a few episodes with Ahsoka where she's a bounty hunter, etc. So we do kind of see a different side to Asajj, but this side of the romance we don't see. It's only in the book. But Quinlan as well, goes falls to the dark side, falls in love, then is welcomed back by the Jedi. He's kind of Dooku's apprentice in this as well, and he's actually seen on television as like a separatist general. It's not just he's hidden away and shown the lessons of the dark side. He is put on television as a leader of the army alongside Grievous, which I just think it is a great dynamic.
100%. And I think this is where, like you said, the books are great because you wouldn't have got half that stuff, right? But for me, the whole Ventress thing is interesting just based on everything extra that we see. So going back to what you said about her being much smarter than people give her credit for, she's worked out that Quinlan's a Jedi really early, but goes with it and thinks, I can play this off, I can deal with it. And then I also really love the character kind of growth and development that we get from her based on the fact that she puts aside all of the, I'm going to use the term hate, but the animosity, I guess, towards the Jedi Order to go and help them when they're trying to get Quinlan
back. And I find it
back.
bonkers that Asajj, there's two scenes, isn't there, where she is in the council chambers. I mean, who'd have thought that? And I don't like calling her a Sith apprentice, but a Sith assassin is welcomed into the council and given a full pardon.
Yep.
And you think of the Jedi and what she's done and the lives she's taken, and that again was a point in the book where we saw the council split. Because you would have had Jedi like Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, probably Attacker, whereas you had like a Plo Koon, Obi-Wan, who were kind of willing to forgive and forget, for want of a better phrase. And so, yeah, I mean, the story brought up so many differences. And I really, really liked that. I think it was really well written.
I think parking the main characters to one side, it also fleshed out a lot more of the universe for me. Obviously we got insight into the Night Sisters a bit more with everything that was going on, where we get all the scenes on Dathomir. So we get the initial scenes where Ventress takes Quinlan there to train him.
Yeah, we get we needed to get, like, in my head when I was reading that bit, I was like, this is perfect for an 80s Rocky Balboa montage. Like, where they're running up a hill, like training,
chopping down a tree with his
chopping-
lightsaber.
Yeah. You gotta knock his block off.
But so we got that. We then obviously get all of the stuff around the cave and the kind of rite of passage that the Night Sisters go through. But then also all of the stuff. It's not on Sereno, I don't think, but at when they go to try and assassinate Dooku, all the stuff around where like he's making these public appearances and he's holding like these galas and like I think that's interesting.
I think I definitely thought that was really well played out actually, because Dooku was at a fundraiser, and I think we're seeing this a little bit more with the Bad Batch. We've seen a little bit of it where a lot of the separatist systems and separatist senators that we've seen in Clone Wars and seen in the Bad Batch now, they actually believed that Dooku was right in his assessment of the Republic. And let's face it, Dooku was right. The Republic was corrupt, but obviously he was helping it be corrupt. So there will be a lot of sort of freedom fighters, if you like, of the separatist side that saw, Dooku as being absolutely spot on. Didn't know that he was corrupt. Didn't know, obviously, that he was a Sith. Just thought he was a Jedi that had left because, again, he thought the Jedi were corrupt with the Republic. And so you got all these, thousands of systems that have left that thought that Dooku was like their savior.
And this is the point. This is what I'm starting to love more and more about Star Wars as I get older. We covered it in Andor as well. How it feels real.
Yeah.
So we talked in Andor about how when you watch the movies, you're just like, oh, the rebellion just exists. And it fleshed out actually all of the things that you don't think about how do you fund that? How do you and this was very much, I feel like we saw it a little bit with the Bad Batch as well. We just assume that the Separatists are the bad guys.
Yeah.
When you
Good guys are good, bad guys are bad.
Because we watched the movie from the point of view of the Republic and the Jedi. And that's not how this is always seen by everybody in the universe.
I thought one of the biggest points, and it was only a couple of lines long, but Dooku makes a speech and he says, you can see that we're more humane. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was along the lines of, we're more humane because we are putting droids on the battlefield. They are putting human beings, as in, obviously, clones. And that really actually struck a chord with me, that's a big argument for the Separatists, that yes, they might be, spending all this money on droids and, doing whatever they're doing to planets, but they are not sacrificing human beings or, living creatures. They're sacrificing droids that can be, made a dime a dozen. So, and that seemed to be a really big point in the book for me, where you're almost like, well, that's how they're framing it, because surely PR for the Separatists, you'd think would be quite difficult, because all we see in the Clone Wars is, they've raised a planet, they've got a machine that will kill
people.
Yeah, and all of that, and stopped, food getting to planets. And you look at that and you think, well, of course they're the bad guys, like you've said. But actually, this book really illustrated that Dooku was good at PR. He was a smooth talker, and so was able to bring more systems to his cause by saying, we are the good guys. We are fighting for a better republic. So that was another just interesting facet of the story for me.
I think that probably brings us really nicely around to general thoughts on the book and general kind of takeaways of the book. So
listen, we say this a lot with things. We say, really enjoyed it, really liked it. And obviously for the points that we've specified, I really did enjoy it. It was better than I expected it to be, I have to say. That was because I knew that it'd be good. I knew that it was a Clone Wars arc that was kind of canned. They didn't have really time to put it in, etc. They didn't have the space for it. But I'm really glad this is where books, obviously, it's about 400 odd pages long, I think. So it's a meaty book. And I think we gained so much more from it. And it also, for me, having read it after watching the Kenobi series, where Quinlan again has a tiny mention, I understand now how Quinlan could have survived the Purge, in terms of he's a bit of a loner, didn't do things the conventional way, and so is probably a bit happier. It probably is easier for him to survive in the outside world. So surviving in a world where, the Jedi aren't respected, that everyone's out
just
for him.
relying on himself and his skills.
Yeah, and maybe having to do, some dark deeds to get by. Whether he's stealing, food or whatever he's doing. I think he's probably a bit happy with that, and we see that in the book, and the layers of it, the layers of Kenobi being in the book as well. The fact that Quinlan kills his apprentice, kills his
Best
friend.
Yeah.
I find that to be a really interesting again.
So I've got so much respect for him as a character. We've talked about how strong Obi-Wan is, to have witnessed the death of his master at the hands of the Sith, then to have witnessed his apprentice turn to the dark side, and to see the woman that he loved murdered.
Yeah.
Go through all of that and not fall to the dark side.
Yeah.
Arguably, Quinlan Vos goes through even more.
To come back, because he has the yellow Sith eyes in this, doesn't he?
To have turned and to come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just so much respect for him as a character after that.
And that also showed for me as well, again, more disagreements between the council. But the fact the Jedi took him back and basically rehabilitated him. But again, Asaj had that connection. She was like, the first time, she said, he hasn't turned back. He's still got the anger in him. And she was the only one to have seen that. And the fact that she was that desperate about it, that she went to Obi-Wan individually to talk to him about it, knowing that Obi-Wan was kind of a confidant of Quinlan. It was really well written for me. There wasn't too much in the book. It was a nice length. It wasn't over the top dramatic. It really fleshed out a lot of feelings, and Star Wars is doing that more and more often for me. It's not just all lightsabers and action. It's emotion. And take a bow, Christy Golden.
Yeah, so I think I 100% agree with all of the comments around this is the Star Wars that, as an adult, you want to see. This is the
bit complicated.
Complex narratives, complex kind of thoughts and feelings, and complex storylines that deal with some pretty adult themes and adult issues. And it just means that, and like you said, it coming from the Clone Wars just highlights even more what they were trying to do with the Clone Wars. And it just, like you said, we sit here and we go, I enjoyed it. We're going to enjoy it. We love Star Wars, right? This, for me, sits up there as one of the better books that I have read set in the Star Wars universe.
And I think the fact that I know it was written after Disney had bought Lucasfilm, so I know it was already in, that Disney obviously okayed it. But it would have been really easy for Disney to retcon that and, say that it's not canon. But I think it stands up as an individual novel.
Yeah,
I really do. I think it stands up. Just it didn't need a sequel. Doesn't need any expansion on the book. The book itself was a really great little subplot of the story.
Can we just before we fully wrap up, can we just deal with the fact that the one thing that I have a slight issue with is the fact that Quinlan is the one that they send on all these undercover assignments.
Yeah.
The guy that's got the most distinctive fluorescent yellow tattoo across his face.
Yeah.
They go, you'd be great to just blend in.
You'd think every crime family, like the Pikes and everyone, would have like okay, these are the people on a list here that we don't deal with. Number one, there's a guy with a fluorescent yellow tattoo on his face. Or does he maybe wear makeup to cover it up? Quinlan seems like the type of guy that would paint his nails. So
I don't know. I just
black, obviously.
It did really make me laugh when they were like, "Oh, he's a specialist at undercover."
That's what made me think though when I was reading the book, and when you found out that Asaj already knew he was a Jedi, I was thinking, surely Dooku would have made it a kind of task for Asaj to know as many Jedi as she could.
So many.
I know there's thousands of Jedi in the universe, but there's some that probably stand out on the battlefield or for different reasons.
But I guess the premise is if he's doing undercover assignments, he's maybe not.
Yeah.
No. So this is
he's
this
well
is the
known
point.
in the Jedi Order though, and you'd think that Dooku would know him and be like, I know he does undercover missions.
Age difference from when he left the Order, you just don't know, do you?
But Quinlan, I think, is a similar age to Obi-Wan. So in Clone Wars, he's going to be close to 40.
I had it.
Obi-Wan's age is really.
I felt like he comes across as younger just from mindset.
I feel like he's mid-30s.
Somebody in the comments let us know.
I think he's maybe clinging on to his high school life. That's the kind of
someone in early midlife crisis.
I think that is the vibe he's given off. I think if he had a family, he'd have divorced them and bought himself a Lambo or something like.
So,
Or he's
yeah,
doing
some,
parkour somewhere.
so-
Like
somebody in the comments let us know.
Yeah.
But I guess to kind of summarize, we both loved this. If you guys haven't read it, obviously this has been full of spoilers, so sorry. But give it a read if you get a chance. Really
I knew
worthwhile.
that, and I will just say on that, for me to wrap up, I read it after knowing the ending, and it didn't take anything away
No, it doesn't.
from the story itself,
No.
because that actually, as much as it's a big point in the book, it's a minor point in the story that she obviously dies at the end. That is a very minor point, and actually it didn't take anything away. When I was reading the book, I was thinking, I know that she dies, but yeah, didn't take anything away from the story itself.
So go check it out. And we will catch you guys all real soon in the next one.
May the force be with you all.